I read a lot, so you don't have to read as much. They read my summary to see, do I want to really spend time on this book? And there are some books that I do defensive reading because the book sucks, but I want to know what it says. So if I'm up talking to someone, I can tell you why I think it's either useful or not.
Where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Welcome to Conversations with Coaches, where top executive coaches talk about the tools that shape their practice and then give them to you for free. This is a stakeholder-centered coaching production where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. I'm Brandon Mergard, CEO and Master Coach, and I'll be your host as we take you inside the coach's toolbox. The best part of this season is you get all of the tools. We are giving each resource to our listeners for free as part of our mission to measurably improve leadership effectiveness around the world. You can download the tools at mgsec.net/coach-toolbox. That's mgsec.net/coach-toolbox. And by the way, if you are a Stakeholder-Centered Coaching certified coach, you already have access to all these tools inside your SCC Coach portal. So get yours today. Before introducing my guest, I want to give some context as to why this has become such an in-demand episode. We have recently conducted some Q&A sessions for our certified coaches, both live as well as collecting some questions through a web form. And a common question came up in just about every session. It was like clockwork. We've had the question come up before, but not in this frequency or in this volume. And the question was about using stakeholder-centered coaching in academia, in the academy, in schools, and educational institutes. And whenever this question comes up, whether by email or in a live stream, the very first person I recommend the asker to reach out to is none other than the Bill Sommers. So, without further ado, William Sommers, PhD, is a practitioner who integrates theory into leading and facilitating schools. Hailing from Austin, Texas, he can be described as an educator, a principal, an author, a leadership coach, a consultant, and as you'll get a chance to see firsthand today, also a very passionate learner. In fact, he's come out of retirement multiple times to put theory into practice as a school principal, finishing even his most recent assignment this year, in fact. He's a certified stakeholder-centered coach and holds multiple other accreditations and certifications. Bill served on the board of trustees of the National Staff Development Council for 5 years before serving as president in 2006. He's the former executive director of the Secondary Curriculum and Professional Learning for Minneapolis Public Schools, and has been the senior fellow for the Urban Leadership Academy at the University of Minnesota. He served as an adjunct faculty member at numerous institutions, including Texas State University, Hamline University, University of St. Thomas, St. Mary's University, Union Institute, and Capella University. Bill has been a program director for an adolescent chemical dependency treatment center and on the advisory board of a halfway house for 20 years. Bill is also the author of 10 plus books and is the chief editor for Learning Omnivores at learningomnivores.com, which we'll get into today. So, Bill, welcome to the episode, and thank you so much for donating your time to share some wisdom with our network.
Well, thank you for having me. I really enjoy expanding some of the options for stakeholder coaching.
Yeah, I think this has been a long time coming. As you and I have briefly discussed in our community calls before, my introduction to applying stakeholder-centered coaching was actually in a for-profit education institute. And I have the slightest glimpse of what stakeholder-centered coaching looks like in the academy. But what I hope to do today is to get into what that looks like at a ground level, because you've been doing this as a principal for so many years. So can we begin by exploring kind of how coaching made its way into your very colorful career as an educator?
Well, I was ready to leave education in 1983. I had been a knuckle buster, the attendance and discipline guy, and my nickname was the executioner. I still can do that. But in '83, I was ready to leave, and my third principal, who happened to be an ex-nun, said, "Go see this guy named Art Costa, and he's doing thinking skills." And I remember saying, "What does thinking skills got to do with schools?" And I'm an old physics major, so I was like, "Get the algorithm, plug it in, get the answer, move on." So I went to hear this guy, and he started talking about thinking, and then also started talking about this coaching thing. How do we increase reflectivity among professionals? And so I actually got in on the ground floor of the think tank that developed cognitive coaching, which is a reflective model. So that works for people who have the ability to reflect. But since I had a minor in industrial relations from the University of Minnesota, I started reading off the business side. And so as education wasn't producing as many good, in my opinion, mental models that were helpful, I started looking to the business side. And somewhere in the teens, 2000 teens, I read this book, "What Got You Here Won't Get You There." And I said, "Who in the heck is this guy? I got to learn more about this," which actually I put in a call to or an email to Marshall, and he actually returned it within 2 days. I couldn't believe it, and found out where the training was, and I think it was like 2017, maybe 16, that I showed up with Frank Wagner and got trained. I'm going, this reflection is one thing, but this has meaningful relationships with the people that are receiving your leadership, metrics, and really focused on leadership development. So I can do reflection and other things, but I really have been centered 90% in the past few years on stakeholder centered coaching. I think it can change education.
Let's get into that a little bit. What is the, as an educator, you see stakeholder centered coaching as a very powerful force to shape education. What is missing in the current mental models that stakeholder centered coaching fills?
Well, the current model is, as a principal, you have to do evaluations for probably a third of the tenured staff and every non-tenured staff. And every year, and I've coached principals for over 35 years. Every year, I'm going to get in those classrooms this year. And then it's April. Oh my God, I've got to get the evaluations done. Well, there's nothing wrong with you. Here, sign here and I'm done. First of all, there's no feedback that's meaningful. Haven't even talked about what were your goals for the year, etc. So what I found is with stakeholder centered coaching for myself, but then as I do it with principals, the people who are receiving the leadership are giving you the feedback on, are you making progress or not? Now, by going through the process of getting feedback from the stakeholders, choosing one or two, and usually what comes back in the principal, a good principal, says, "Oh God, I got to do 5 or 6." I said, "You get 1, and if I'm in a good mood, it might be 2. if you can't do 1 or 2, you can't do 5 or 6." So, and what's also happened is what the principals figure out is the stakeholders that they trust, because they identify them, not that they necessarily like them necessarily, but if they got a problem, they know this person's honest. And so what they find is that trust is increasing, psychological safety is increasing, and there's a better bond organizationally with leadership and teachers. I've also coached custodians, and non-certified staff.
So can you, for those of, for our audience who isn't fully familiar with stakeholder centered coaching, can we for a moment just do a thought experiment? If I am one of the, let's say that I am a teacher in your staff, you're taking on an interim position and you announce, hey, we're going to be doing stakeholder centered coaching. I raise my hand and say, Bill, what is stakeholder centered coaching? Can you explain it to me, sort of how you would introduce that to a school?
Right. Well, how I introduced the last school, which was last year, got the leadership team together. And I said, you don't know me. I said, I could stand here and tell you, you should trust me, but watch what I do and see if it matches what I say. Because I can talk to them blue in the face. Let me get this out right away. Knowledge is important and insufficient. You got to do it. You can't just talk about it. So I said, I have two questions for this leadership team. Number one, look around the room. Are these the people you want to get in trouble with? We're going to get in trouble. So are you in it? The second question I have is, will you tell me if you think I'm wrong? And of course, out of the back says, well, you're the principal. I said, I didn't ask you that. He said, I'm coming in here as a kind of a turnaround guy. I said, you got to tell me, don't let me walk off a cliff. So then I say, stakeholder coaching. I'm going to pick those people who I think trust and will give me the honest answer. I'm going to ask you 4 questions. What am I good at? What are my challenges as a leader? If you were God Empress for a day and you had 1 or 2 things you could change and build, what would it be? And number 4, are there any alliances out there that I need to be aware of? Because one place I went into, I had to smoke it out that the HR director is married to the district AD. I want to know that going in. Because you get, so what I said, then I'll take all those things, pick 1 or 2, go back and say, this is what I'm going to work on. And then I'm going to be checking in every couple of months. And then I will have, well, Karen Wagner does the assessment, a mid-course and a final assessment. And so I hope to be a positive 1.0 on a -3 to +3 scale.
So you're using this in an interim type of role. I have 2 questions. The first is, how are people generally responding to the way you introduce stakeholder center coaching?
They go, this is different. What planet did this guy come from? But we're going to level the playing field, and it's about trust. And I remember Marshall, and then there's also a book called Unleashed that's on the list. This is about you, not about me. So, I think what happens is, well, Ray Dalio in his book called Principles says you need to be radically open-minded and radically transparent. And if you have the confidence and competence to be transparent, you're going to go a long way to build trust and move on to real important things rather than CYA or anything else.
Beautiful. Bill, this is jam-packed with nuggets already. Thank you. So the shock value, it's always there for stakeholders. Everyone's scratching their head saying, what in the world is this? Do you see resistance on the backside of that?
Well, there's always the group that sits out and says, is this guy for real?
Mm-hmm.
And if you've had a lot of false starts or a lot of BS, even though my initials are BS, if you've had a lot of BS in the past, then you're not going to believe anything until you see it in action. And so the stakeholders become your conduit to say, yes, he really does believe this. Yes, he really does do what he says. And so then it expands out.
Mm-hmm. So it sounds like you are the person who is collecting feed forward, sharing your action plan, sharing your goals. Are there others who are working for you that are also going through the same process?
Well, absolutely. Matter of fact, one of my APs from last year, I'm working with and saying, all right, identify who are those 6 to 8 people that you trust, not that you necessarily like them or don't like them, but you trust them. If they walk in your office and say, we got a problem, you're going to pay attention. And so he's identifying them right now. And I said, then I'll go out and do the questions that all come to me. I'll put it in themes. We'll sit down and pick, first I'll give him a script to say, this is why I want to do this. But what's going to happen is he's been there 1 year. He's excellent. And he's going to be a wonderful principal down the road. So I really want to support him on a track that's going to elevate his leadership, because I've got 40 years of experience of all kinds of things that worked and 40 years of experience of all kinds of things that didn't work. So depending on what happens, we will, a few years ago, an elementary principal in an urban school, we did a checklist. Marshall has a 6-point checklist or whatever. We picked up 6 things, and she said it because she was doing that on a daily basis, it made all the difference in the world.
Go ahead.
You got this much repertoire, but you only need this, but you don't know what that is. So you better have a lot of repertoire.
So stakeholder centered coaching helps you distill the salient points. Okay. And you mentioned your AP, which I assume is associate principal, or
yeah.
Is that fair to say? When you take these interim positions, because this is relevant for stakeholder centered coaches, either in education or in business, you are going in, you're leading the way as a coachee, collecting the feed forward, you're building those communication pipelines, and then you leave. Does the associate principal fulfill the principal role thereafter, and that's your contribution, or how does that usually work?
Well, when I take this on, usually if the superintendent calls me, I know they're in trouble. Because I don't play games. And so if you don't, my reputation, and you don't want me if you just want somebody to sit there and monitor and make everything. So when I take these on, I say, you have somebody inside that you want to develop, or is this a short-term position? Now, generally, when I do 2 or 3 years, I can do the transfer and succession planning. But when this year, the superintendent decided to go outside and pick another principal, that's their call. Like Drucker said, whoever's got the responsibility makes the decision. So, I'm going to miss them because we really did make a lot of headway. However, in the one time I did a 1 year, it slid back in 6 months. So I'm hoping that doesn't happen.
Okay. Well, I think the next question, your response can range anywhere from observational data to pure conjecture. Anywhere in between is fine. When you think about the impact that stakeholder-centered coaching is having on these turnaround opportunities you're working in, do you see the impact coming largely from the fact that you are role modeling this and then leaving them with those systems? Or do you see the impact being that you are helping others to start applying the systems like this associate principal?
If I don't do it, why would I expect anybody else to do it? Matter of fact, I just read a book, Wisdom from the Bullfrog, at McCraven, and I had never heard this quote before, but he quoted Pope Francis. The shepherd should smell like his sheep. I was blown away.
Oh, yeah. Good. So, I know as an educator, you're faced with so much input, so many books, so many models, so many assessments, so many everything. And it can easily become overwhelming to learn. So tell me a little bit about the tool that we'll be talking about today, which is these book summary. Can you introduce the summaries that we're talking about today?
Sure. First of all, I never read till I was 38 in 1983. I was a physics math guy. Give me a problem, I'll solve all day. Who wants to read a book? And so this guy I mentioned, Art Costa, who's been my mentor for 30 some years or 40 years, he started quoting some work of Charles Garfield called Peak Performers. And I'm going, I've had so much smoke blowing up my pant leg. How do I know if that's true? I actually picked up the book and read it to check his veracity. And I found out two things. One, it did say what he said it did. And there were some other things in there. And I'm going, you can learn from a book? What a concept. So as I'm doing my dissertation, I'm taking all these notes and stuff like that. And so about, I don't know, 2015 or whatever, we started, my friend who is now since passed, I miss him dearly, Skip, and I started learningomnivores.com. And we would host people I'd find somebody that I want to learn from. Edgar Schein, who's now since passed, Peter Block. Some big hitters. Sally Helgeson was going to do it before COVID. But anyway, some big hitters in education and that. But what I found was people would come to these things and they wouldn't read the book. So I started preparing summaries so that they would have some idea of what an Edgar Schein or somebody might say. Well, then it got to be where I would use some of the summaries to do parent newsletters. I would also use the summaries when I'm talking to a teacher about something they have in mind that they want to do, or a leader that I'm coaching. And I'd say, here's a summary. I know you don't have time for a 200-page book, but here's 20 pages, which is more than you probably do anyway. So keep in mind, Mark Twain said, those who don't read have no advantage over those who can. So unfortunately, I don't see a lot of educational leaders reading. I get it. It's time. But if you don't read or at least rub shoulders with other people who are learners, it's pretty hard to only do what you've done. The other thing that helps me is I see things in business that are going to hit education faster because there's a quicker feedback loop in business versus education. They say, well, how do you know your kids are going to do well? I said, well, let's wait till they're 30 years old and then I'll tell you. They walk out as a 12th grader. I don't know. You're hoping for the best. The problem with that is parents and business is on a 20, 30-year time lag. When they went to school, it was good enough, maybe. And so I keep saying, whatever it is now, it ain't good enough, which got me back to the Marshall's book.
So you and your friend Skip, you noticed this issue. There's too much information, not enough time, and you put together the site. So tell us, we know that the summaries are on there. What else will people find when they go to your site? Well,
it's called www.learningomnivores.com. And when you go on, it says resources. So I put up new rules, things that irritate me, and I write about it with references so people can read it. One thing I put up was, are you an orange or a peach? And I got that metaphor from Frank Wagner, who's been just wonderful and generous with his time. So there are the new rules. There are book summaries. It's really what, I read a lot, so you don't have to read as much. Now, a couple of superintendents tell me they read my summary to see, do I want to really spend time on this book? And there are some books that I do defensive reading because the book sucks, but I want to know what it says. So if I'm up talking to someone, I can tell you why I think it's either useful or not. And then I'm starting to develop time savers for principals, weekly announcements or newsletters and stuff that can just save them time. They can put their own tin on it, but so I'm starting to develop that. And, a couple of people said, why aren't you charging for that? I said, because I'm a contributor. I want the world to be a better place. So,
yeah, your presence here is simple evidence of that. So people will find these time savers. They're going to find some summaries. They'll find your blog. They'll find some of the books that you've also written that I can see you have right here behind you. You want to give a quick introduction to these four books that
on
you've
there is a
got?
list of publications that I've either co-authored or authored. The one that just came out in June was called Compliance Cop to Culture Coach. So we spent decades doing test scores. How's that working for us? We got more disaffected kids. We got more dropouts. This is ridiculous. So to a culture coach, from my experience, if you can't get the culture right, not much is going to happen. And the culture's got to be right for the staff. Because as Art asked me once, what are you doing to create a mentally stimulating environment for your teachers? And I said, I got to do that too. And typical Art says, well, if you don't do it for the staff, why do you think they'll do it for kids? I'm going, darn.
Ah, the beauty of Feed Forward right there. Yikes. So let's say that I'm a coach listening to this. Okay, I also am aware that there's scores of books out there. If I were to download this tool, which has your top 10 articles, your top 10 book summaries relevant for leadership coaches, what might be some of the books that I'd see on that list?
Well, some of the books first of all, we'd see Marshall's book on what got you here, what won't get you there, because you have to have, and this is straight out of stakeholder coaching. If you don't have CHAD, there's nothing I can do for you. Now, CHAD for me is an acronym for courage, humility, and discipline. Because if you don't have the courage to confront real data, the humility to say I'm not as good as I want to be, and the discipline to follow through. A quick example, in a very large urban district, I was commissioned by a foundation to coach 12 principals. And by Christmas time, I called the foundation. I said, I'm firing 4 of them. And they said, you can't fire them. I said, they're not following through with anything we talk about. I'm not going to waste your time or money. And so I really take CHAD seriously, courage, humility, and discipline. The next ones you would find that I put on this list was How Women Rise and Rising Together. How Women Rise was Marshall and Sally Helgeson, who's premier women leadership. And I'll just say it. We need more women and people of color in leadership positions, period. Get over it. This is a multicultural country. And so Sally has expanded my knowledge base tremendously. I'm a white male, I'm sorry. I remember one of my teachers last year said, when we looked you up, they said, what's a 76-year-old white guy going to show for us? And then the next thing he says, God, were we wrong? I said, strap it on. So other books, Amy Edmondson's Fearless Organization on Psychological Safety, huge for organizations. And I've done that as a pre-test and a post-test and had other people that I'm coaching do that to see what the level of trust is in there. I put, I think on the first stand, I put McCraven's book in there. He's got like 21 different things from being a Navy SEAL. One of the things that really is important is have a bump plan. And I said, what is a bump plan? He said, assume it's not going to work. What do you do now? Which, when you think about the Osama bin Laden issue, the helicopter went down. They had already practiced that. I'm going, wow. So what's the solution after next? Because not everything works. Let's see, what else did I put on there? Trying to remember what my list was. Corner office. Adam Bryant did a survey of 70 CEOs and came up with 5 things that CEOs had to have. And number 1 was intellectual curiosity. If you're not curious about things, you got to do that. Now, team smarts and fearlessness, and all those things are on there as well. I think reading anything by Adam Grant, I just think he is amazing. Give and take, originals. Think again. He just has a lot of great books. I think I've got 2 or 3 of those on book summaries. So I've got a lot of summaries that I haven't even gotten on the website yet.
So, as a very passionate learner myself, and thinking about my own bump plan, I tell myself, hey, I'm going to go on, I'm going to download these, I'm going to read all 10 of them. I'm going to get 10 books worth of knowledge in an evening. Thank you, Bill. In reality, the bump plan I should be creating is, so what? How are you going to implement it? How are you going to track what you've learned? So as an educator, speaking to someone who may be downloading this and it'll sit in the downloads folder until it gets deleted, what could someone do to increase their likelihood that they'll learn and apply the summaries that you've created?
Number one, whatever you read, tell somebody. Don't keep it to yourself. Because as soon as you tell somebody, oh my God, did you ever hear about this? As soon as you tell somebody, it embeds, it's like forced review, and that person gets to hear what you think. And then tell somebody else. And then write an article about how this is something you want to consider. And then if you can't take the knowledge and make the world better, or the school or the organization better, so how can you, by reading something, attract others to your vision, to attract them in and say, this is because of this, but I know I want to see if we can satisfy this issue that's coming up. So that's how, when I'm 30 years ago, a woman named Suzanne Bailey, who was a wonderful trainer, looked at me in a group and said, you're a synthesizer. I never thought about it that way, but it's not one thing. Oh, I do a lot of proverbs and that. Think about this proverb, a Yiddish proverb. Beware the prophet who carries only one book. So synthesize whatever you can from many different sources and apply it to your situation. So if you live alone and have a dog or a cat, tell your dog or cat what you like.
I like it. My dog is so sick of hearing the books I'm reading. Good. So download it, read it, tell someone that you know. So I would issue a challenge to all of our listeners then, and that would be to, when you download this resource, find something you learn, and then either reach out to Bill or I by email, or even post it on LinkedIn and tag the both of us, tag Stakeholder Centered Coaching, tag somebody, and we can see how we're actually learning from these summaries and putting it into practice. Now, tell me a little bit about how you use these summaries as a coach.
Well, as a coach, depending on what the issue is, and I usually start with the 20. We have 20 statements or questions in stakeholder coaching. Although I've adapted some of them, more to an educational. So based on if so it's delegation, building trust, being better presenter. Instructional coaching to a person. It just depends on what their issue is. I can bring to bear. I don't have to even give them a five-page summary. I can say, here's a one-pager that might be something worthwhile. And your best learners are going to come back and say, you got more of that stuff? Which all I'm trying to do is enroll them and reel them in.
Good. So do you generally accompany a summary with the book? Do you say, here's a book, I know you're busy, so here's a summary as well?
A couple of my APs, I actually will buy a book for them. So once I know that they're hooked into it and want to do that, let me also explain not only my coaching principles, and of course they're coaching or teachers, but I have a couple of principals now who have teachers who are using stakeholder coaching with students. getting students to be the stakeholders. Now, we've only had 1 year and 2 classes, but I've got 3 principals who are going to work with teachers to do it in classroom. I think this has huge potential for kids. First of all, their involvement. Kids are, when they're part of it, I go back to, oh God, this has to be 20 years ago. I had a math teacher who was getting his doctorate. And what we did was I coached him in front of one class of geometry and didn't coach him in the other class. What was interesting in the class that were coached, number one, they did better. And when I interviewed the kids, it was like, we just thought Mr. McCluskey was good at math. We didn't know he thought through all this stuff. And after about 6 weeks, the kids were going, ask him this, ask him this. They started participating. I thought it was wonderful. But you got to have a teacher who's willing to do that too.
Oh, it's got to be terrifying as a teacher, but clearly the results will speak for themselves.
As our conversation unfolds, you may be wondering, what is this whole stakeholder-centered coaching thing? It's a leadership development process that guarantees leaders become both recognized and acknowledged as more effective leaders by key stakeholders in 12 months or less. Nearly 5,000 coaches have been trained in this methodology. The coaching program is designed to build functional expertise from 3 stages: intellectual, practical, and applicable on the job. In addition to graduating with the most rigorous, research-driven coaching methodology on the market, you'll also walk away with measurable coaching results and a lifetime certification to show for it. We don't just believe in what we do, we stand behind it. And that's why we are giving away complimentary access to the first stage of the training to anyone listening to this podcast. Get your very own access code today by visiting mgscc.net/sample-course. Let's tune back into the interview.
So if I'm a principal or I'm an educational leader or I'm sitting in a business office thinking about, a new project team, how do you go about establishing this? Hey, I'm going to coach you in front of your stakeholders. How do you go about presenting that and getting buy-in?
Let's have a conversation and see if you think I can help you, or assist you, because you're the one doing the work, not me. But let's just talk about it. What does it involve? And some have said, well, and I had a assistant principal last year, because I had several. One said, "There's no teacher I trust." Okay, that's over. There's no point if you can't trust, the people who are receiving your leadership. This game is over. So we did a different kind of model. I'm still the principal. Doggone
it. So how do you navigate that resistance? Surely you have some unfortunate experience with hard-nosed teachers who may not be interested in actually collecting feed forward, sharing an action plan. What do you do?
Well, if they really are not giving any feedback, like the mid-course surveys or whatever, and they're not giving feedback to the person I'm coaching, then I will have a conversation, or have the person I'm coaching have a conversation. Is this something you really want to do? Because if you don't, let's just end the relationship. I call it honorable closure. Let's not get into blaming and you didn't do this. No, if this is not something you can sign on for, because what I find with is a teacher who has that, or a principal who has that humility, they're more willing, the teachers are willing to be part of how can we improve, and they want improvement too. So you start with a hot core center of your stakeholders, but that spreads very quickly. But sometimes you have to have the hard conversation, and I didn't put that on my list of 10, but there's a book called The Hard Things About the Hard Things. One of the things he said, I'm going to clean this up. If you're going to eat dung, don't nibble. Get at it.
What a quote. What a hard-hitting quote.
I have all kinds of quotes.
Oh, this is so good. So, expanding our scope here, some thinking about, the people who have asked, the coaches who have asked about implementing stakeholder-centered coaching in the academy have ranged from, hey, I'm working in elementary and middle schools, I'm doing high schools, and at the university level as well. So what's your perspective on stakeholder-centered coaching in higher education?
It's probably the hardest one you'll ever find. Matter of fact, professors and people in higher ed are known for, and their identity is wrapped up in their knowledge base. So how do you teach is not necessarily, now it's not universal, but most of them want to hide behind their podium or hide behind their notes. It's getting better, but it's still, I'm known for my expertise in a narrow knowledge. So that sometimes is really hard to get them to show that humility on, can I do better? But I will tell you, the profs that I've worked with that are willing to do that, the satisfaction surveys go right through the roof. Because the people feel like you're listening to me, you're taking me seriously, and you have a genuine interest in improving your craft of teaching. Another thing that I do recommend, depending on the person, is take improv classes. So I'm on the board of an improv group, and when I started taking improv, it scared the bejesus out of me, but it's the best thing I ever did. My life is improv as a principal. So another thing is just happened because I spent 35 years in Minnesota is where I'm usually known. So the superintendent group in Minnesota is starting to talk to me about doing a book talk once a month based on my book summaries. Because superintendents are being pulled politically all over the place. So how do you keep your focus on learning? Matter of fact, most superintendents that have coached said they'll spend 50 to 75% of their time managing a board, not necessarily working on instruction.
And when we look at this implementation model you discussed for professors, in this model, are the students the stakeholders? Are the other professors the stakeholders?
Well, it can be either or. It's really important if they have a department where they really want to do improvement, individual improvement, because then you've got your colleagues who are willing to sit in your classes and give you feedback. And, so that, and all this is, good feedback, but Marshall's right. It's feed forward. There's nothing you can do about the past. What are you going to do forward? Let's, we learn from the past, but let's do something different and see if you do the same thing, you're going to get the same outcome. So if you can get some professors in a group that are willing to do this, but I've only done that once because there's such ego issues that's really hard. So usually I end up with the students. So I've had trouble getting a professor out from behind the podium. Nobody's going to hurt you. Get away from your notes. Talk to them. Yeah. Oh God, what have you read lately?
So you see more resistance there at the teaching level than you do at the administration level.
Oh yeah.
In terms of when you apply stakeholder-centered coaching at the administration level, are you seeing more net impact than when you apply it at the teaching level?
Yes, because it's like Marshall talks about. Alan has affected how many people. So when you get a leader that is really getting feedback, etc., notice that they've got several departments and people that they deal with and parent. So the impact, it's kind of like, I don't know if you read The Spider and Starfish, but a spider, if you step in their head, they're dead. a starfish, you pull one leg off, it'll regrow a leg. So you're trying to get out there as a starfish started going. It made a difference for this one. So you can impact more if you can get the gatekeepers on your side.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Tell me about the development plans for the summaries. You said you've got a backlog of summaries that are finished but aren't uploaded yet. Is that right?
I'm not a tech person, so I think on the last work didn't on office hours somebody talked about Chat GPT, and so I've got to follow up on that because I'm thinking that AI scares me because I watched a presentation. They said, "Well, that's really not Morgan Freeman," and I'm going, "So now you're telling me AI is not credible?" So, but I am interested in our office hours, and I can't remember was it Rob or I got to circle back. Maybe
Dan Sittner.
GPT could help me turn these around faster.
Yeah.
I got 1,300 books, by the way.
You've got your own library there, Bill. That's amazing.
Yeah, it's I've still got 100 that I haven't even got notes on.
But you have notes on 1,200 books?
Yeah.
Oh my goodness, Bill, that is phenomenal. Good for you. My goodness.
The problem is there are direct quotes out of the book, so I can't be selling them or distributing them because that when I do a summary, I take that and then I try to put it together in something in cogent form and add pieces that I think are worthwhile because I can't just dump summaries out there that are direct quotes. So that's why I'm thinking is Chat GPT, even though I'm a techno peasant, might be the solution.
Well, Bill, the good news is this season we will have had Michael Beale out of the UK at Henley Business School talking about AI and creating an AI cheat sheet for coaches. And we'll have Mitchell Levy, who will be talking about credibility and also how he uses AI in a credible manner, both as a coach and as an author. So we'll be filling some gaps, and I'm going to be learning as well because
you're not the only one who's just a little scared by the whole.
I guess I could learn something yet. I've got 2 books that are just coming today that I can hardly wait to get into.
What's in the mail for you today, Bill?
Well, one is probabilities in everyday life. How do we teach kids probabilities? I took calculus. I have yet to use it. So probabilities, statistics, probably something I could use. And the other one is language that leads that Marshall wrote the forward for. So based on what came out, I ordered that book, so I'm waiting to dig into that. One that I didn't put on the top 10 was A Time to Lead that Frank put me onto. And I think this is really important because I've used this in several conversations so far. I had never heard of Zingman and Folkman and Zinger. They did some research, and when I saw that research, if you've got a fatal flaw and no signature strength, you're at 18%. No fatal flaws, no signature strength, 50-50. And if you have a signature strength and no fatal flaws, 81%. Whoa, that knocked my socks off. Thank you, Frank, again, for leading me down the right path.
Oh, yes. Yeah, it's almost scary. I mean, it's scary how obvious it is and yet how terminal those fatal flaws, unbalanced, can be. In terms of your reading, let's say your rate of reading and summary, if you were to put together a summary of this probability book from the time it arrives today to the time you'd have a summary out, what's the life cycle usually look like, or the timeline usually look like?
A month, because I've got to finish a couple more. One I want to get on is called The Last Dropout. A guy named Bill Milliken started doing street academies, and it's about wraparound services for kids. I mean, if you don't have food, I don't think the quadratic formula is going to be real high on your priority list. So they're in about 270 schools now, and I've actually signed up to volunteer in Austin. So I do want to get those notes out. It's more for education, obviously. But so it'll probably be a month or so before I get out.
That's impressive. It's a month or so for more than one book plus a summary. That's impressive. And I want to remind our listeners that the resource that you will get from this episode is the top 10 book summaries that Bill has for coaches. But if you go to learningomnivores.com, you're going to see all of them that are published now. There's no paywall. There's no login wall. It's all there for free. What you'll get here is a download for 10 of them that you can access offline in PDF format. So be sure to check out learningomnivores.com. So, Bill, I'd love to know, what are some of the key learnings that have come for you as the author of these summaries, as you've put them together and published them?
Well, by me reading it, and I still do underlining and touch the book and dog ear it and whatever. And so then when I go back through it and look at my notes, and I take whatever I think is important. And so I'm actually doing like 3 different reviews.
You're reading and walk me through that one more time. You're reading it and annotating it.
I underline what I think is important. Then I go back and reread what I thought was important. And then I'm putting it on a computer file. So I'm really getting like 3 shots at it. And so I do a summary.
Okay, and it sounds like you're using physical books, not much of an ebook guy.
Yeah, I've done a couple ebooks, but I'm tactile. I like to.
There's something about a smell of a book too, right? And the first bend and crease of that spine. Yes, a good book. Well, if I'm a coach, okay, I'm working with leaders. I see coaches frequently recommending books. Are you okay if we distribute your summaries to clients who maybe don't have time to read the books we want them to read?
Absolutely, or just direct them to Learning Omnivore.
Bill, it is my understanding you're working on publishing a book right now about stakeholder centered coaching. Is that correct?
Yeah, for educators, yeah.
Can you tell us a little bit about it?
Well, I've actually written it with another stakeholder centered coach, Betty Burks, who's been a superintendent, where I've been an assistant soup, but basically principal. So we started collaborating. Matter of fact, because I was talking to her about stakeholder centered coaching, she then came out to San Diego and took training from Frank. So I said, you want to do this together? Because I don't have as much experience with the superintendent. So I'm talking to Carwin Press after this conversation, and the acquisition editor that I'm talking to has already published like 6 or 7 of my books. So I'm very hopeful. But Marshall wrote the foreword.
And, tell us a little bit about what's inside. If I'm an educator
Yeah, it really just takes, stakeholder centered coaching. How do you do that in a school, and how do you enroll the leaders? And then how do you help them get stakeholders who are teachers or custodians or non-certified staff, et cetera. And then, talk about follow-up. And then there's a chapter at the end with one of my people I've coached for 2 years. And she's a principal up in Grand Rapids, Michigan. And she's the one that first started experimenting with students. So she wrote one of the chapters. So I'm kind of excited about getting that published and out there for educators. Because I just don't think our evaluation system is, let's just say it's not as productive as it could be, in my opinion. I'll tell you
what would you say are some of the...
Yeah, tell us what you really think here, Bill. How effective is it really?
Well, our evaluation system, we walk in and say, oh, God, everything seems okay. Okay. Come on. That's feedback. That doesn't, like I worked with an assistant superintendent last year. He says, "Oh, you're so good. You're so good." I'm going, "Can you tell me specifically what you think I'm good at?" "Well, no, you're just people like you." That didn't help me.
Mhm.
Whipped cream doesn't
Yeah,
help.
Feedback is a skill, and it's a really hard skill to learn. And I think that's one of the true impacts of Feed Forward is it has such a short learning curve. There's no shame and no obligation like there is with feedback. And all you have to do is say thank you. It's easy to receive, easy to give. But there is that learning curve. So what would you say are some of the unique aspects of implementing stakeholder-centered coaching in education versus doing it in, say, a business environment?
Well, education is not used to this, but it is getting direct feedback from the people that you are leading. Having my supervisor write up an evaluation on me basically is the parents don't want to kill you, so you're good. So, I mean, I can't tell you how quickly and how important it is to get real, honest feedback, and again, to use to get better, to do feed forward from the people who are receiving their leadership. So when I left this last school system, I got 3 evaluations or recommendations from 3 teachers. I'm done sending out superintendent evaluations on me. They really don't know what I do. But the teachers had to live with me. They know exactly what I did. Everybody in the school knew what I did. So I'm now going to send out the three. I could get more, but 3's enough.
Bill, I'm curious about the stickiness of the process. Go ahead.
Well, and I think also the focus. Okay, people have lots of ideas, but let's focus on 1 or 2 and get that under your belt. And if you do 1 or 2, a couple other things will be solved on the way. So you've got metrics, you've got feedback from specific people who are receiving your leadership. You got a way to judge it, and it just builds trust in the system.
So if I am Bill, I'd like you to imagine that I'm a coach listening to this episode. And through your words, I've become inspired to serve or volunteer or give back to the education system locally, wherever I might be. What would be some potential steps I could consider to be more involved in helping improve leadership in schools?
Well, would this be people who are stakeholder coaches? So that's number 1.
Sure, let's assume.
I think number 1 is you go through stakeholder coaching, you're having a coach, and you go through the process. Because 2 of the principals that I coached 2 years ago are now coaches. There are very few educators. What do you got, 5,000 coaches in stakeholder coaching? I bet there aren't 10 educators. So number 1, go through it yourself and then see what comes out of that. I'm telling you, I'm getting positive 2.5s. Unheard of. It just, I'm going, Karen calls me and says, "Well, there's 2.54. I'm going, what?
And for anyone not familiar with the scale, it's a -3 to +3 scale.
+3.
That's huge. 254, amazing. So let's pick this apart a little bit. If I am not, let's say I'm a stakeholder-centered coach, I'm not an educator, but I do want to give back. One recommendation would be to reach out directly to school leadership and say, "Hey, here's what I can do for you. Let me help you out." Describe the process and get rolling. If I am an educator and I'm not certified, is there a resource I should read in order to bring this into my school? Would you recommend reaching directly out to a coach?
Well, I think, a coach who's like Betty or I or Laura, who, since we've been doing it, it's easier to give somebody who's got experience who really some things you need to think about. Um, but bottom line, I'll go back to Chad. That person's got to have that courage, humility, and discipline to do this. Because right now, superintendents and principals are leaving like crazy. They're just tired of getting beat up. And so if you can't, in my opinion, if we can't create the cultures that are going to attract and retain our best teachers, we are really in serious trouble in public schools. And private schools will get the same, same results, but eventually. But I think you really have to have the courage to do this. It's not easy. Now, one of the reasons that I really got really involved with this even more is there's a guy named Jim Knight, who is a fantastic instructional coach from the University of Kansas, written many, many books, and have a whole group of instructional coaches. He called me, I want to say 5 years ago, and he said, "Will you coach me?" Now, the only reason I'm saying that, he went out on Twitter and told everybody that I was his coach. So this is not like private information. And I said, "Jim," and I've known him for a long time. I said, "You're asking me to coach you, who does all this coaching for schools and principals on instruction?" He said, "Yes." He said, "I want to grow my own organization." And so I said, "Well, this is stakeholder coaching. I'm just telling you, you're up for this." And he's got humility up the yin yang, and he's a great learner. So we went through a year of stakeholder coaching. Thank God he got a positive 1.6, or I wouldn't have gotten paid. At that point, I was doing exactly what Marshall and Frank and Chris are doing. And I rarely get somebody who will put their, the whole money on. Most of them want to do a monthly contract or whatever, but it's got to be 6 months to 9 months, or we're not going to see much movement. But also, I'm not going to spend time if it isn't working and you're not doing it. How do I know anything works?
So if there are educators out there who want to get started with stakeholder centered coaching, don't have an inroad to reach out to coaches, would you be willing to field some questions, maybe point them in the right direction?
Absolutely.
How could they reach out to you? How could they get in touch with you?
Well, my email is one omnivores. It says contact. My email and phone number is on there. But if you're going to email me, put SCC in the heading, because I'm such a great technology person. A friend of mine said, "Why don't you answer my emails?" And I said, "What's your email?" And said, "Lori at Hotmail." I said, "I thought Hotmail was a porn site." As a principal, you don't want any connection to a porn site. So SCC put it on there, so I will recognize it and answer it.
Bill, you are such a delight. Good. So again, ladies and gentlemen, that's learningomnivores.com. You can click the contact us. If you want an email, you can send it to podcast@mgscc.net and we'll connect you directly to Bill. And then another question, Bill, if there are certified SCC coaches who don't have inroads at a school but are happy to offer their time and expertise, could they also reach out to you directly? Would you know where to point them?
Absolutely. I really do want to be part of getting SCC into schools, because I really do think it can change the way we do school.
Good. Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. If you are a stakeholder centered coach and you want to give back, if you're an educator and want to bring stakeholder centered coaching in, reach out to Bill on his website, or you can drop us an email, podcast@mgscc.net, and we'll connect you with Bill.
Well, thank you, Brandon. I really appreciate the conversation.
Yeah, this has been a delight. I appreciate your insights. I think this, as I said, this is a long time coming. People need to know how to apply this in education. And I'm right there with you in saying this is necessary and now is the time.
We need to elevate leadership and learning.
Good. Well, Bill, thank you so much for giving your time, giving your wisdom. Again, if people want to reach out to you, they can go to learningomnivores.com. And if any of you at home have a question or would like to recommend a guest, you can send an email to us, podcast@mgscc.net. And remember, if you want to get access to the top 10 book summaries relevant for coaches, you can get that at mgscc.net/coach-toolbox, mgscc.net/coach-toolbox. And if you're already certified, then you have access to all of these tools inside of your coach portal. So, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. My guest, Bill, thank you for joining us. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen, at home, on your car, listening in at the gym, for joining this episode of Conversations with Coaches with the book summaries by Dr. Bill Sommers. You can find links to his social media below. This has been an episode of our series Conversations with Coaches, which is a Stakeholder Centered Coaching production where we believe everyone deserves a stakeholder-centered leader. Thank you for joining us. And until next time, remember to keep learning, keep improving, and keep taking your coaching skills to the next level.